Good morning. I'm Caroline Jones, the chair of the Hate Crime Partnership in Calderdale, and welcome to our launch of Hate Crime Awareness Week. During this webinar, we want to raise your awareness about hate, the impact that it has on people and their families, what support is available to you as a victim or a witness if you do make that report, and what happens once the report is made. Throughout the week, there are a lot of events that you can actually engage in digital, obviously because we can't meet together with the COVID restrictions, but we'd like you to get involved. And you can do that in a number of ways. You can find out via the Calderdale Council website or follow us on social media with the hashtag #NoPlaceForHateInCalderdale. So I think it's really important you understand the impact that hate has on a person and their family. So can I now hand over to the chair of the Disability Partnership Calderdale, Marion Spruce, who's kindly agreed to let us know about what happened to her when she experienced hate. So Marion, please can you talk to us about your incident? I'm not sure we've got Marion. I think Marion may be having some trouble joining us, so we'll come back to her later, but it is an impactful incident and you'll see that it actually affected her in such a way that she changed how she travelled through Calderdale. So can I now ask Anne Glue, who works for the Brunswick Centre, to give us an insight of hate crime from her perspective?
You can. Thanks for that, Caroline. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of hate crime, and I'm going to talk a little bit about institutional hate crime and internal hate crime, and then I'm going to finish off on a positive note, something positive that happened in Calderdale. So to start off with, one of the examples that I've got is about a 26-year-old gay man who's HIV positive and suffers with mental health. He disclosed his sexual orientation and his HIV status to one of his close relatives, who then told her partner. The partner then told the rest of his family, and they all turned against him and didn't want anything to do with him, which left him really vulnerable and isolated. The partner then kept turning up at this man's residence, calling out sexual orientation abuse and abuse around his HIV status. And it reached such a pitch that he tried to take his own life. So it's a really tragic story. It did get reported, and it is still under investigation. So, you know, I do hope there is a positive outcome from that, but that it's just a terrible thing. The second example I'm going to give is, again, a 27-year-old gay man who's recently been diagnosed as HIV positive. He's currently single, but his ex-partner told his family and the whole of the village where he lives, where he's been brought up all his life, and also put it on social media. So then a lot of his friends were saying to him, well, why didn't you tell us, and we're going to report you to the police, even though they weren't sexual partners, they're just friends of his. He then feels like he didn't report it because he didn't think that it was a hate crime. He were getting abusive phone calls around his sexual orientation and his HIV status, but he still didn't think this was a hate crime, and he didn't know what to do, and he thought he's going to have to leave the village where he's been brought up and lived all his life. The worker from the Brunswick Centre, you know, supported him around this, and he did end up reporting it. And he feels that the police have been really helpful, and he feels as if he's been really supported through that. So that's good. Then I've got a little bit here about institutional homophobia. This is not from sort of our area, but it's about 3 magistrates in North London. And some neighbours were causing noise nuisance, and the neighbours were a young gay couple who complained about it. These neighbours then started singing lyrics to the gay couple, calling them fairies and fags and making this song up. It ended up going to court, and 3 magistrates unanimously found the perpetrators not guilty of the charges of using threatening, abuse and insulting words that caused this couple alarm and distress. And they concluded that song was not homophobic. The magistrates felt it was acceptable to excuse a hatred case like this and homophobic. This endorses, we feel that this endorses homophobia, biphobia and transphobia. And it sends a dangerous message, actually, both to the victims and the abusers. There's lots of examples of institutional homophobia, which goes on in churches, in prisons, in other religious institutions, in hospitals. We did have a case a few years ago, well, a few cases actually in local hospitals, where pregnant women who were HIV positive were put in a single room with a warning poster on the door saying that there were an infection risk. And a lot of them, you know, the families didn't know that they were HIV positive, and one of them dared come out of the room because she thought that everybody knew. Again, the Brunswick Centre worked with the hospital, and that's been resolved, and thank goodness that no longer happens. Then I've just got a quick example of some internalised homophobia, and this happens when somebody from the LGBT community takes the biases and prejudice and hatred that's towards them, that's reinforced by society, and then they turn that back on themselves, and they deny the sexual orientation to themselves and to others. And then they can attempt to change the sexual orientation or the gender, and they have feelings that they're not good enough. Many closet LGBT individuals grow up in traditional environments where anti-gay is the norm in family life, social life, educational, religious, media and political environments. To cope with this, they overcompensate for their inner conflict, and some individuals may openly reject and even lash out at the very sexual orientation identity groups that they belong to, and then what they secretly belong to, in order to gain acceptance. It suppresses inner turmoil, and they deny the true selves, and therefore some of them may become perpetrators of a homophobic hate themselves. And then am I all right for time, Caroline?
Yeah, just if you can just sort of wrap it up a little bit more now.
Yeah, right. I'll wrap it up now with a positive one. Happy Valley Pride. This is in Hebden Bridge, and it started in response to a piece of homophobic graffiti in Hebden Bridge Town Centre. An LGBTQ organisation was formed out because of this, with the help of local artists that turned the offensive graffiti statement into one of celebration and acceptance. And they continue to celebrate LGBTQ life with an annual festival of diversity and awareness, which includes everyone. And their mission is to celebrate LGBTQ life in Hebden Bridge and surrounding areas. They promote equality and diversity to eradicate discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity through education and engagement. That's it from me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you. I mean, obviously, you've given us some insight there to some very tragic cases, and also something about institutional homophobia or whatever in terms of LGBTQ. And I think that just endorses the need for our partnership, really, so that we can work together to actually address it, point it out, and then eliminate it, no matter what the discrimination is. So thank you for sharing that, Anne.
You're welcome.
I noticed, Julie, that you've joined us now, Julie Stott from the Disability Partnership Calderdale. And we were obviously looking for Marion to join us, but unfortunately, I think she's having difficulties connecting. So can I please ask you to give us Marion's story so that we understand the impact that her hate incident had on her and the decision she then went on to make?
Yeah, certainly. Before I do, I've had lots of calls and emails just now from people trying to watch this webinar, and it's not live at the moment on the council website, so we do apologise if anyone is trying to watch it. I have sent a message to the people at the council who are running the webinar. Hopefully they'll get it live soon, but at the moment we're not actually live, to my knowledge. But hopefully it has been recorded so we can watch it back from the beginning for those who have missed so far this part of the webinar. So to go on to Marion, Marion's my boss. She's a lovely, lovely lady. She's really, really clever, really intelligent. She started losing her sight about I don't know how many years ago, a long time ago. And she always used the help of an assistance dog, a beautiful black Labrador called Mary. Mary's really, really clever and really well trained. And she was trained to help Marion on the bus, into shops, into taxis. And she was also trained to take Marion to the front seat of the bus, which is the disabled seats. She actually worked as a judge at Magistrates Court at Bradford, so really intelligent lady, quite confident. But she used to have to go from Halifax, where she lives, to Bradford every day on the bus. And so what happened was she used to try and get on the bus, and Mary would take her to a seat at the front, but there'd always be people sat there, some just because it was full, some not disabled, some people who just didn't realise. And most of the time people would actually move and let her sit down, but quite often there'd be these group of youths who were coming back from school who wouldn't move, and they would try and kick Mary, the guide dog. And luckily, because the dog was such a professional dog, Mary would continue down the aisle and get her to the back of the bus if she could find a seat further down the bus. And they used to jeer at her, like call her names and just be horrid, really nasty. And so what happened was, in the end, one day Marion got home and found out that she had spit all down the back of her jacket. And it wasn't until she got home they realised that as she'd been walking past to find a seat further down, they'd been spitting at her as well, which is awful, isn't it? So anyway, it turns out after that, Marion just wouldn't go on the bus again. The bus driver saw it, wouldn't do anything about it, because he was scared of this group of youths, because they got on his bus every day coming home from school. He didn't want the trouble that they might cause him. And Marion didn't want to get on the bus because she thought that if she did report it, they'd still have to get back on the bus the next day and they'd still be there. And she was worried what they'd do afterwards by telling tales on them. So she decided to just take taxis from that point. So she never actually reported it. And when we asked her, why didn't you? She knew how to, and she knew it was not acceptable, but she said she couldn't prove it. And there was more of them than her. And being a judge, knowing about the balance of probabilities and things, she knew that it was their 5 words against her 1 word. And so she just decided not to get on the bus again. And it was really awful. So yeah, so that's the story really. Yeah, that's about it. Can't think of anything else to say.
Well, thanks for that, Julie. As I say, and I do know Marion personally myself, and I think it's really sad that she found herself in that state. And hopefully, as a result of this webinar, we'll give more people confidence to come forward and report whether they're a victim or a witness, because it really is unacceptable to behave like that, and nobody would accept that. So thank you for sharing that, Julie. Now, can I invite Nadine May? He's the chair of the Council of Moss for Calderdale, to provide us some information about the work that they do, a key partner in our partnership. We do a lot of work together. So welcome, Nadine.
Good morning. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. Slightly echoing, can you all hear me okay? Yep, excellent. Yes, from a Council of Moss perspective, this hate crime I'm going to look at today is around race and religion. That's one of the most common types of hate crime that we find ourselves dealing with. And a lot of that can be associated with colour and difference. And because it's a visible difference, sometimes it's a lot easier for bigots and for racists to attack people that look different to them. And from a Council of Moss perspective, what we tend to find is that it comes in fits and starts in certain locations. Other locations, we can find victims not only becoming victims of a hate crime, but then becoming secondary victims when they try to report that. And I'll go into a little bit more detail in relation to what a secondary victim is. First of all, as an individual, anything that obviously causes them harassment, alarm, or distress, or words that are used or behaviour that's used towards somebody because of their race or because of their religion. And when we look at the Macpherson inquiry, as a result of Stephen Lawrence, the police have started to look at it very, very differently in relation to when you come to reporting certain offences. So if a person perceives it to be racist, whether race or because of their colour or because of their religion, then it should be recorded as a hate incident or a hate crime. And what we've found at the Council of Moss is that there are a number of individuals that sometimes don't have the confidence of reporting it direct to the authorities. And there's a number of reasons for that. Some of it might be a language barrier. Some of it, I think one of our earlier callers talked around people feeling uncomfortable reporting something that they're unsure about themselves. And if you're unsure about it, sometimes you want to take advice.
We seem to have lost Nadeem. I don't know whether he's going to be able to get back to us. Hopefully. I'll just give him a second or so. Okay, right. Well, I think it's important to recognise that hate is personal. And obviously Nadeem was telling us there that the most common is because of religion or race. There are other factors in that, but you know, somebody is who they are. Sometimes it's about life choices. So obviously we had the tragic case of Sophie Lancaster, who was a goth, and she got murdered because she was a goth. And it's really unacceptable. And this seminar is all about telling you about the life stories and understanding the processes and the support that's available if you come forward and report one. So to make people feel more confident, I think it's important that we actually go through that process and understand what's going to happen. And so firstly, can I ask Sale, you're going to talk to us about how do I report a crime of hate or an incident of hate when I live in Calderdale? So can I hand over to you, Sale?
Apologies.
I'm just about to go into the reporting process with Sale, Nadeem. So what I'll do is I'll give you an opportunity to come a little bit later on, if that's okay.
Thank you. Yes, apologies for that.
Right, thanks for that, Caroline. Just the important facts I'll go through is colleagues have talked about hate crime reporting, having the confidence to report hate crimes and incidents. Again, Nadeem just touched upon the Macpherson inquiry, so I might be going through some of the information Nadeem might have shared with us. But the important thing is for individuals, members of our public from all characteristic groups, all backgrounds, whether it's race, nationality, religion, sexual orientation, a disability, what we'd like to offer is individuals to report any form of hate crime and hate incidents via our third-party reporting centres. We do understand sometimes speaking to communities that there is a lack of confidence to come forward and report these crimes and incidents. And through the partnership arrangements, what we've offered for many years in Calderdale is via the Calderdale Hate Crime Partnership is third-party reporting. And that can be done via Together Housing, the Office of Citizen Advice Bureau, Victim Support Scheme, the Brunswick Centre, the college, etc., the frontline council offices. Unfortunately, with COVID-19 at present, it's still with us as we're going along this kind of journey, is our third-party reporting is rather reflective of what's open. So the best thing would be to actually check on the website, on the online reporting, to find out if them third-party reporting centres are actually open. But again, what you can do is access staff that have been trained up, they've been briefed about third-party reporting, and what they will do is that they will become the conduit between yourself as the victim or third-party reporting it, and they will make contact with the police and other departments and organisations to ensure that your story as a victim, what's been told, what's happened, is dealt with in a professional manner. The conduit between the third-party reporting is that they will basically hold your hand and go through the process, and they will go through what will happen, and they'll do it in a manner where the pace that you set is the pace that they will work at. So it can be reported either anonymously. Julie talked about Marion's story where she didn't have the confidence to come forward. Now that could have been a third-party report put into the system where it could have been reported and recorded for intelligence. And through our partnership arrangements, what we can do is pick up where these incidents and crimes are taking place, and we'll then ensure through the partnership that the right resources can be put in place to ensure that the victim is either supported or the incidents and crimes taking place are dealt with when they do happen.
Thanks for that, Sale. Now can I invite Keely? Keely, Victim Support. You've obviously got a service there that gives a little bit more help to victims and witnesses. Can you explain what happens then?
Yeah, thank you, Caroline. So hi, my name's Keely. I'm from Victim Support. For anybody that isn't aware of Victim Support, what our services are, our core aim at Victim Support is to make people feel safer and find the strength to move beyond crime. Obviously, more specifically towards hate crime, not only is the victim having to deal with the crime itself, but obviously having to deal with the fact that they've been targeted because of their core identity, which can really affect people's self-esteem and their physical and mental well-being, really. And that's what we're here for, is to support somebody through that process, really. We've got trained volunteers and caseworkers that provide support. And some of the things that we can do specifically around hate crime is informing people of their rights under the Victims Code, providing practical support. So that could be things like safety planning, providing small practical items like personal alarms or small alarms that can be fitted to your home, just to make you feel a bit more secure. Liaising with necessary agencies. I know Sale was mentioning there about if you're wanting to remain anonymous, third-party reporting centres can report on, so that at least the correct agencies are aware of these incidents that are happening. And we can obviously liaise with other agencies to make them aware of things that are happening in the community if a victim's not specifically wanting to come forward and make a report. And emotional support, I think that's the main sort of support that we provide. Prior to COVID, we did a lot of face-to-face emotional support. But as a result of COVID, Victim Support have actually set up an online resource called My Support Space. So that's an online access, and on there's different videos, interactive guides, techniques, tips, activities. There's also an online diary that people can fill in, and it's kind of replacing that face-to-face support where people can go on and find tips and tricks on how to deal with and cope with the effects of a crime. We also do provide telephone emotional support at the moment with COVID that's happening, but the online tools are really great at the moment for filling in that gap of sort of personal face-to-face support. We were talking there about reporting. Victim support, you don't have to have reported a crime to the police to get support from Victim Support. We will support anybody that has been a victim of crime. People can self-refer to us. But if somebody is thinking about reporting and not really sure what to do, they're a bit sort of unsure about what will happen, we can support somebody through that process as well. So we can talk to them about what their rights are. Obviously, each individual case is different, so we can speak to them about pros and cons for them about reporting. Obviously, let them know what to expect if there was to report that crime, talk them through the criminal justice process, and do all those things with them to make them feel comfortable and to help them come to an informed decision about whether to make a report or not. As I touched upon earlier, we are a third-party reporting centre. If somebody decides that they do want to obviously make somebody aware of what's happened, but they want to remain anonymous, then we can pass that information over to the correct agency, as Sale mentioned there, to make sure that people are aware of what's going on in the community and see if there's anything we can do to try and reduce that from happening to other people. Our support is free and confidential. I have got a couple of phone numbers here, so if anybody is wanting to receive support from Victim Support, our number is 0300 303 1971, and that's from 8 in the morning till 8 at night, Monday to Saturday. We do also have out of hours, so that's our support line. I think that's 24/7, and the number's 080816 89111. So if anybody is thinking about wanting to get support or just wanting to talk to somebody about something that's happened, then by all means do give us a ring, and we're always here to listen and support somebody.
Thank you for that, Keely. So obviously we've talked about the police there a little bit as well, when we're saying whether people want to report it to the police. So it's important, again, that you understand that process. And in line with what Nadeem said, I think the police and many other partners have learned a lot, particularly from the Macpherson inquiry and some of the other reviews that were then done beyond that, into trying to understand how to deal with hate incidents and hate crime, and working together so that the victim and the witnesses feel supported and that they're actually getting some form of justice, whether that be, you know, restorative justice or going through the criminal justice process. So can I now ask one of our police colleagues, Rachel Stevenson, who's a PCSO over at Brighouse, to provide us some perspective about what happens once somebody reports to the police. Rachel.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, the police have learnt quite a lot regarding hate crime, and there are many easy ways now that members of the public or people, as previously said, a third party who may want to contact the police on behalf of somebody, or in fact that they've witnessed something that they themselves feel upset or offended or distressed by. COVID, as has been repeated, has affected a great deal of things, but with the West Yorkshire Police, we're trying to find as many ways as we possibly can that you can actually contact us. We're always opening new avenues, and the latest one at the moment is the web chat. So we do actually have where people can actually report to us via the web, or they can email, they can ring 101, the usual way if it's not ongoing, and we can also ring 999. What I found is that a lot of people are always afraid to ring 999 because there's so much information out there regarding don't ring 999 if it's not an emergency. But if it is an emergency and you do feel like that you are in danger, please don't hesitate, ring 999. So the hate crimes and hate incidents will always be investigated just like any other crime. And the difference with hate crime is that alongside this crime is a hate coordinator. So we have a hate crime coordinator who manages and overlooks each individual complaint or concern or report that comes through. Every single time a crime is created on our system, the hate crime coordinator is also copied in. So they are running with the investigation from the beginning to the very end, and often beyond as well. So alongside the usual, when you would report a usual, just a normal crime, this time you have the support, a little bit like victim support, of the hate crime coordinator. So the hate crime coordinator will be making sure that the investigation's done in a timely manner, that anything that you don't understand, she will give you contact details. You'll be able to contact her via email or text or telephone. It's a very personal when they're talking to the victims. So any questions they'll be happy to answer. And they'll talk you through the process. I mean, a lot of times people don't understand the process of what's happening and who the police are, etc. So, you know, it's an extra balance of support there. They'll make sure that you've got all the information regarding our colleagues from victim support, and any other department that we think that may benefit you, we'll also make sure that you get in touch with them, or if you need support whilst you're in touch with them, we'll provide that as well. So yeah, it's we're quite passionate about hate crime, as you can see, even as lanyards. You know, I've had this possibly 6 months now. It's not just something that we do on Hate Crime Week, that we are very passionate about this throughout the year. There's lots of information on West Yorkshire Police's website. If you want to speak to your local PCSO, you'll find that information on the Neighbourhood Police team site. Very easy to use. Just go to West Yorkshire Police, look up NPT Policing. It's very easy to navigate, so you can then go to your area, and within that information, you'll have your local PCSO, your PCs, your sergeants and your inspectors, and there should be the email addresses and telephone numbers for you to be able to contact us. So should you find it difficult, should you think sometimes we don't want to report it online, I think we will come. Yes, COVID's here. We'll be masked up, we'll keep our distances, we'll try absolutely everything to make sure that you're confident, but we will not ignore you. And if that's, please feel free. If you see somebody walking through the street from West Yorkshire Police and you want to approach them at that time, because at that moment you feel confident, please do so. We'll never ever turn you away. So that's the situation, just like any other crime. As mentioned before, there's two different sorts. There's the hate incidents, and then there's hate crime. So hate crime is like, it's anything that's perceived by a victim or any other person. So if a person's actually not actually involved in the incident, you just happen to be walking down the street and you see this, then you know, please report it. Then it could be possibly a hate crime. So a hate crime is motivated by hostility, or it's a prejudice based on a person's disability, race, religion, sexual orientation, or any other gender identity or a perceived disability, race, religion, sexual orientation, or gender identity. So a crime would be such as, for example, could be like physical attacks, physical assaults, damage to the property, offensive graffiti, arson. A lot of people just don't realise, you know, we get arson attacks where, you know, fires, bins set on fire, or they come out of the properties, they see somebody sprayed offensive things on their doors or on the windows, on where the place of work is. Please report it, please do. So, you know, the threat of attack, such as inciting hatred words or pictures or videos and offensive letters, you know, abuse it. There is many, many, many ways that what we say suspects can affect people, and these things can't carry on, and it's got to be stopped. So difference to hate crime is now an incident. So it's a non-crime incident. This can be seen by the victim or, again, any other person as motivated by hostility or prejudice. So for this incident, is a difficult trying to make it clear. So example would be verbal or online abuse, insults, harassment, such as taunting, so being taunted, offensive leaflets being left around. So somebody's put something offensive and just happened to leave it on your doorstep, things like that. But what people need to be aware of is they will not be investigated any differently. They will both be investigated the same, and the hate coordinator will also be involved. So the moment that the word actual hate is mentioned, the coordinator is on board. And like I say, sometimes regarding crimes and things can take time, things can get motivated, police officers get very busy. The hate crime coordinator will make sure that this is done in a timely manner. We don't want these things going on and on and on. And should a prosecution come along, which can start to drag, they will still be in contact. They will still be your coordinator to make sure that you're aware of everything that's happening at this time.
Thanks for that, Rachel. I think the most important point to take from that whole process, from Sale, Keely, and then on to Rachel, is that there is support available. You have a choice about what happens, unless it's really, really serious, and we've got to protect other people's lives, and the system will obviously maybe take a decision that you wouldn't want to do, but it has to do that because it's a really important issue. As a member of the public or anybody or a partner working with us, what I'd say is, don't worry about whether it's an incident or a crime. If it's happened and it's about who you are and it feels wrong, report it. It can be an information chain, or it could actually lead on to a criminal investigation. Do not let yourself be worried by all of that. Let the good professionals who work in our partnership support you through that, and your family as well. So all I'd say is, if it doesn't feel right and it's about you, it's likely to be hate, report it and get the support that you deserve. So I think the next part then, we've alluded to that it can then go into the criminal justice process. And I know Rachel said that sometimes that takes a long time, but it's for good reason, because it could affect somebody's liberty. And so we have to make sure that all the evidence that's available is properly collected and presented to the court, who can then make that decision through the support of the prosecutors. So can I now invite Yvette Levy, who's from the Crown Prosecution Service, to tell us a little bit about what happens if my case went to court.
Well, yes, Caroline, I will. I think it's important, though, that everyone is clear that not every hate crime that's reported to the police will necessarily be prosecuted as a hate crime. Not every case will even be seen by the CPS. I'll come on to that in a moment. I echo Caroline and Rachel's comments about not worrying about the difference between an incident and a crime. There are sometimes things happen to them where they think they're a crime, but they're not. And equally, incidents can happen to them where they are actually a crime. So I think not worrying about that distinction is one of the key points, I think, from this. So if I cover what the CPS does do, what we don't do firstly, because I think there are a lot of myths around there, and we don't make the law. Parliament does that. We have to follow the law. We're talking about a court. Obviously, we take cases to court. We don't investigate a crime either. That's a matter for the police. Nor do we sentence. That's a matter for the court. We're actually separate. We are part of the criminal justice system, but we are separate from the courts and we're separate from the police. We only take referrals of any cases from the police. We don't take them from members of the public. And what we do is advise on the police on cases for possible prosecution. We review the cases submitted by the police, and in all hate crime cases and in other more serious cases, we determine whether or not someone should be charged with an offence. We prepare, and finally we prepare and present the cases through the court. So what does that mean for hate crime? Well, how do we decide whether or not someone should be taken to court? And we actually apply the Code for Crown Prosecutors, and this applies to every case, hate crime, very minor offences to very serious ones. We have to determine firstly that there's got to be enough evidence to prosecute the case. Is it more likely than not that the court will find the defendants guilty of the offences charged? So you've all heard, no doubt, of the burden of proof upon the prosecution, which is to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt so that the court is sure that they've committed the crime alleged. When we are deciding whether or not someone should be prosecuted, we have to think, what will the court conclude having considered the evidence in the case? So the prosecutor would need to assess things like whether or not the evidence can be used in court. Is it credible? Is it reliable evidence? If we do think that there's enough evidence, we would then go and consider the public interest test. Now, a lot of cases will not necessarily lead to a prosecution because there isn't enough evidence. So, for instance, we might not be able to prove who the perpetrator is. The account I think I heard earlier about Marion, particularly about what had happened to her, I would say very much that is a case that could have been investigated, and it might have been prosecuted depending on what the investigation reveals. And just because it's sort of one word against that of another doesn't mean that the case, that we can't prosecute the case because we don't have enough evidence. That is something that we would have to consider, but we would also look at the facts and everything else that is available in the case. So I think that's very important. Just because it's one word against the other does not mean that we can't prove the case. We would have to look at the circumstances of that case. If there isn't enough evidence, the case can't go anywhere, no matter how serious the offence is. If there is enough evidence, then we'd have to go and consider the public interest, so the wider public interest. So we would look at a range of factors, which I don't have very much time to go through, so I won't, other than to mention the fact that the court will be looking at how serious the offence is. And obviously, a lot of the hate crimes we see, they're corrosive to society and to individuals, and we will take that into account when determining whether or not it's in the public interest. Most of the time, hate crimes, it will be in the public interest that we prosecute. And in fact, in the code, it does say it's more likely that a prosecution is required if the offence was motivated by any form of prejudice based on the victim's ethnicity, national origin, gender, disability, age, religion or belief, sexual orientation, gender identity, or if the suspects targeted or exploited the victim or demonstrated hostility, it says, towards the victim based on any of those characteristics. But basically, to summarise that, probably not completely accurately, is are we looking at has that offence been committed because of the victim's particular, one of the protected characteristics and their age. So that's a very sort of broad sort of approach. One of the things I think that people don't understand with the CPS is that we're there to represent the wider public interest. We're not the solicitor for the family or the particular victim. Their views are very important to us, but we also have to consider the wider public interest when determining whether or not a case should proceed. So Rachel earlier has gone through the definition of a hate crime. So that is perception. We've referred to Macpherson already. For those of you who know about Macpherson, this is where the perception definition comes from. But that isn't enough to actually prosecute it in court successfully as a hate crime. What the law says about this, to prosecute it in court as a hate crime, is at the time of the committing the offence or immediately before or afterwards, the defendant has demonstrated towards the victim of the offence hostility based on one of the protected characteristics, or it was motivated towards people with those protected characteristics. So most of the time, it's difficult for us to prove motivation. I mean, sometimes we can, but I would say most of the cases that we do prosecute involve a demonstration of hostility. So that might be someone getting involved in a drunken argument with someone else, and they will sometimes pick on that particular characteristic. And whilst they, let's say they're being threatened or something, they will make reference to that characteristic in a particularly hostile way. In which case, that would be, if we're taking that case to court, that would be something that we could prosecute as a hate crime. So we don't always know what the offender's motivation is, the reason why they committed the offence, and if it's got actually anything to do with the victim's one of the protected characteristics. Sometimes you can infer that from the facts of the case, and sometimes defendants actually admit that this is their motivation as well, but that's quite I'd say, smaller proportion of the cases. So we would have to prove one of those two things to successfully prosecute it as a hate crime. Even if we can't, even if something's happened to someone and we can't prove in court it's a hate crime, there might still be enough evidence, we still will could have enough evidence to prosecute it as a crime. It just means we can't say to the court that it is a hate crime because we can't prove one of those two things I've said actually applies. Now, if we can prosecute it as a hate crime, the law requires the courts to increase or to mark the fact that it is a hate crime by saying that it's these features are an aggravating feature. So the offence might have lots of aggravating features about it. I'm doing a talk, I think we're doing a talk this week on offences, for instance, against the NHS, who on staff there can unfortunately receive a fair amount of hate crime, and there are lots of other aggravating features in those cases. But this is specifically, Parliament is saying to the courts, we specifically want you to treat this offence more seriously because of the hate crime factor. So what does that actually mean in reality? Well, the senior judiciary within the courts have, the senior judges, should I say, have recognised the harmful effects of hate crime, and they have encouraged all the courts when they're sentencing offences for hate crime to say what the sentence would have been without the particular hate crime aggravating feature. So effectively, what the court is doing is encouraging the court to take a two-stage approach, and so that the aggravating feature can be spelled out, so it's made this much of a difference to the sentence. I don't think I've got enough time to go through several examples, but we do have actually a recent incident from Calderdale. We do publish what we call these hate crime uplifts. We do publish the details, anonymised details of these cases on the CPS website, along with our policy and our code and our guidance for prosecutors on hate crime. And for instance, here I'm looking at one, forgive me, I'm just looking at a small screen. There was an anti-Muslim comment, and what we think is an Asian or Muslim woman was with children on a bus in in Calderdale, and she just sat there on the bus, and the defendant was saying to her, "What are you looking at, you Muslim?" And there's a swear word. Why don't you, not very politely, I'm not going to use the exact words, go back to your own country? And he also threatened another passenger with violence, and when they tried to intervene, and he was charged with an offence. He was sentenced to a 12-month community order with a 25-day rehabilitative activity requirement, and that was uplifted from 15 days. Now, I appreciate that might not be the biggest uplift, the biggest difference it would have made to the sentence, but there are also cases that we deal with where the court have significantly increased the sentence more than that. That was a recent example, and the type of thing that we do see before the court. So that's just sort of to give you a flavour and an overview of when a case is taken to court, and how that hate crime element is regarded by the court.
Okay, thank you for that, Yvette. I'm going to start to wrap up, but before I do, I'm conscious, Nadine, we lost you mid-flow. So
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything else you want to add from the Council Moss perspective?
No, I think most of it's been covered now. There were just a couple of examples I was going to give. Certainly, as CPS have mentioned in terms of prosecutions, is that the effect that it has. If somebody puts feces at the mosque door, or they throw a pig's head through the mosque door, it's not the effect just on that individual, but it's on that whole community. And it is when it actually, affects the fabric of the cohesion within those communities that we have to take these things seriously. And through Councillor Moss, supporting those communities, supporting those individuals, working with the authorities really gives us confidence in ensuring that the proper action is taken against those perpetrators. So no, thank you. And once again, apologies for the technical hitch.
Yeah, thanks for that, Nadine. Julie, I think you want to come in? You need to unmute.
Yes, yes, please. It was just one extra thing I wanted, if we had the time, to be able to say. One of the main reasons for us getting involved with this was that quite a lot of our members at Disability Partnership Calderdale had told us that they'd received verbal abuse. I don't know if anyone's aware of the lanyards that people wear to say they've got a hidden disability. I've got one here, and so these are quite common now, and there's various others as well. One of our members, who was a 17-year-old young man, was at Aldi doing his shopping, and somebody pulled it off him and punched him in the nose, and he was ringing, not to tell us that he'd been punched in the nose, but to tell us that he needed a new lanyard because it had got broken. And we said, "This is really, did you report it?" "Well, no, I didn't realise I could do. I get called names all the time. I didn't associate it as a crime or an incident." So that's why we really wanted to get involved, because people really want to, understand that it's not acceptable. If you feel bad and you're made to feel, even if it's name calling, whatever, you should do something about it and let the professionals decide whether it's right or, and whether they can do anything about it. But don't just take it, because it's not acceptable. So I just wanted to get that out, really, and just to say, speak up.
No, I think that was a point well made, Julie. Thank you for that. So thank you for joining us in this webinar, and I hope you got some useful information there, but also made you feel a little bit more confident about getting involved and reporting something. I did mention earlier that there are other events that are going to take place during our Hate Crime Awareness Week, and you can follow us on #NoPlaceForHate in Calderdale, or go through the council's website to find out about them. One of the ones I particularly want to highlight is the Facebook event that's going to happen on Thursday at 7 o'clock, where you'll be able to ask questions of our panel of experts. So please tune into that. I'm sure you'll find out more information and find that really useful. I thank you again, and just remember, there really is no place for hate in Calderdale, and as a partnership, we will continue to work together with our members and members of the community to stop it and deal with it. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.